Assalamu alaikum. In this video, we'll learn how to run Selenium UI tests inside Docker containers. Typically, we run those UI tests inside virtual machines. So we spin up those virtual machines, we configure them, we install all the required drivers, then we launch the tests. But this option turns to be a little bit difficult and hard to maintain because virtual machines are a bit hard. So we have an easier option, a more light option, which is using containers. And fortunately for us here, Selenium, the development team, they have created a Docker container that contains all the Selenium drivers and required tools in order to run UI tests inside those containers. We can even view what is happening inside those containers. We can see the actions happening on the web driver. So to start with here, our main documentation, of course, is the Selenium open source. Their code is actually open source, so it's available on GitHub. And then I have created an article about this video, so it contains maybe more details than what I'll be explaining in this video. So go to check it. It's available on Medium. Then, if you are still new with UI tests, I recommend that you check one of my videos that I have created before about how to create UI tests and how to run them. Here I have used .NET. And today we'll see a demo on how to run a Selenium UI tests and containers, and the source code of this demo with all the scripts is available on my GitHub account on this page. So to start with, here I want to explain a bit the architecture of what we'll be doing today. So I'll switch to my OneNote, and here actually when we want to run Selenium on containers, we have, let's say, two main options. First option is to have one container that have all the dependencies, and Selenium, they have created that container and it's available on Docker Hub, so you can use it. And so this container contains all the dependencies. So that's our first option. We could have just one container containing all the dependencies. So this is gonna be our Selenium container, and by the way, that container is called Selenium debug container. So this means that here from our app or our UI tests, should connect to that Selenium container. Okay, and this is, so that container, if we run it on our local machine, that could be something like localhost then 4444. That's the default port number used by Selenium to connect to the web driver. Then we should add wd/hub. Okay, that's the first option. We'll have only one container that will run all of our UI tests. This is good if we have a few UI tests, something like less than 10 UI tests, and those tests doesn't take so long to run. So using just one container is really the simplest solution. But now what if I have dozens of or hundreds or even thousands of UI tests, and I want to run those tests on multiple containers, and I want to run those tests on different versions of Chrome, and not only Chrome. I want to run my tests on Chrome. I want to test them also on Mozilla Firefox browsers also. So what I can do here is that I can create what we call a grid, Selenium grid, and that grid will contain lots of containers with different configurations, different browsers for Firefox and Chrome, and different versions of each browser. Okay, so that the architecture of that grid would be something like this. So we'll have those different containers. So let's say here we have container for for Selenium for Chrome version 80, for example, and then we'll have another one for Chrome v79, for example, and we might have some other containers that will run, for example, Firefox with different versions. And for Chrome 80, we might have something like here, let's say 20 container of this instance, and Chrome 79, maybe we need only 9 containers, for example. For Firefox, we can create, let's say, 13 containers. And our UI tests will target those different containers. We won't target them directly, but we should go through, let's say, a controller. That's the hub. So I'll draw that here. The Selenium hub is the container that will already connect to those different containers, and our app needs to connect to the Selenium hub. The default exposed port address for the Selenium hub is again the port 444. Okay, so we can use that same address to connect to the Selenium hub. So where do we run all of those containers? So here we can run those containers on our local machine for development purposes. And here we'll see how to do that using Docker Compose. But later, if you want to run those as part of our CI/CD pipeline, or we want to automate this, we want to run it on the cloud, then here we can run it on Kubernetes, for example. And we'll see a sample Kubernetes YAML file for deploying all and configuring those this grid. So let's get started with the code. As I have mentioned, the source code is available on GitHub, and I have downloaded that code on my development machine. So here I'll switch to Visual Studio, and let's take a look to the sample test that I have created here. So first of all, here we have the task for initializing the test. So what I'm doing here is that I'm specifying the options that I want to use. So here I say I want to use Chrome. I want to run my tests on Chrome browser. And then later I'm using this option for to get the remote web driver URL. What that is, so typically when we run the UI tests on the local machine without using containers, we use the web driver. The web driver by default will connect to your local machine. But if you want to connect to another web driver, then here we use the remote web driver. So the remote web driver will take the address for the container that we want to connect to. Okay, in my case the address, so I can put it in my code, but that address might change if I want to run those on container on my machine, or then I want to connect to a container on Kubernetes. So for that I have used the run settings file. Run settings file is the configuration file for our UI tests, or we can even use it with unit tests also, or integration tests. So it contains a set of configuration. It's an XML file, and here I have a key value pair called parameter name remote web driver URL, and here I have put the local host address for my container. Okay, and here note I have commented some other values that we'll be using later. So the remote web driver will take that URL, and then it will connect to the driver for that container. Then, once the configuration was done successfully, we'll move to the test. And here, this is just a simple test, so it will maximize the browser window. Then it will navigate to the URL, which is here, my YouTube page. It will wait for 2 seconds for the page to show up, and then it will check if that page have my name displayed on it. Okay, it's just a simple test. Now we want to run this test inside a Docker container using the first option that I have explained, which is the standalone Selenium container. So if you go to the GitHub page for Selenium, you will find that here in their repo called Docker Selenium, they have already published lots of containers that runs Selenium. So we have containers to run Chrome and Firefox, and we have here some other options which are containers to run as standalone. So this is the version that contains all the configuration, and in standalone we have another version actually which is standalone but optimized for debugging. What this means? This means is that we can connect to this container through VNC in order to view what is happening inside the container, what is happening with the browser. So I'll be using this image to run my UI tests. So for that, I switch to VS Code. And from VS Code, I run that container. So it's Docker run, then I expose the port number for Selenium, and then I expose a second port number which will be used by VNC in order to connect to the VNC inside that container. Then I put the container name right here, which is standalone Chrome debug. Okay, now my container is running. Let's make sure Docker PS, and here it is running on port 4444. Okay, now I want to connect to this container. So coming back to my UI test and make sure that here in run settings I have my remote URL connecting to that local host, and here I'm adding the port number with the /wt/hub. That is where we should connect in Selenium. Once that's done, now I'm ready to run my UI test. So for that, I'll go to here where I have the test explorer, and then I click debug. Here I have added a breakpoint in order to stop at this to make sure my test runs successfully. Once my tests are starting, here I go actually to connect to the container using VNC. So for that, I start VNC and I connect it to the port 5900, which is the second port that I have exposed. Here it is asking for the password, and by default it's secret, SECRET. It will open this window, and you see here from within VNC, I can see that the Chrome browser have started right here, and it stopped right there, and it writes here Chrome is being controlled by automated test software. This is the user interface coming from inside the container itself. Okay, so even in containers we can run graphical applications like Chrome. And coming back to VS Code, I find that here I hit the breakpoint, so I'll go to continue running right here, and then I come back quickly to VNC to see what's happening inside my container. So here it's navigating to my YouTube page. It will show the page. It will check that my name is displayed right here. If that is the case, then my test will succeed, and that's what happened right here. Great, so this was our first test that runs inside the container. Here we have used the standalone debug container, but now we want to use the option that scales, which is using the Selenium grid. So to do that, I'll use the Docker compose file. So I have prepared a Docker compose file for that reason, and it's available also on the GitHub repo. So here I have the compose file. Okay, so here we have three services. First one is the hub. Okay, and then we have the different browsers that we want to connect to. So we have the Chrome browser, and we have we'll run 2 replica of this container, and we will run 3 replica of Firefox container. Okay, and all of them, they connect to the hub, because the hub is the one that will control or will dispatch the UI tests across those worker containers. So let's now see how that works. So I go back to my command window right here and make sure that we should stop the already running container. So name here, and here VNC tells me the connection was gracefully closed because I have stopped the container. Okay, fine. Now I'll go to start my Docker Compose file by using the command docker-compose app. This will take a few seconds, and then we'll see that the hub is started, then the Chrome, then Firefox containers. Once that's done, now I can go to connect or to run my UI tests against this Selenium hub. Make sure here you have the port 4444 exposed. Okay, so this means I don't need to change the remote URL here, because it will stay connected to my localhost 4444. And now I can go to run my UI test again. So let's run it differently here from this nice icon and VS, click on debug. This will start the test. For now, we won't see the visual stuff as we saw earlier, but we can do that actually if we specify that in the Docker Compose we want to use the Node Chrome debug version. Okay, so from here we can connect to this Chrome node if you want to. I have already done that. So again, I can start VNC and see what is happening. Start VNC, connect to my localhost. Type the password, which is secret, and here I see the browser started running. If I go back to VS Code and click continue, from here I can see that now again my test will open the YouTube page and will check if the label exists. Great, and at the end my test passes. Cool. So this is the option for running the grid using Docker Compose. We have run those different containers on our local machine. Okay, we said that also we can run this grid inside Kubernetes. So how to do that? Here I have added the YAML, the Kubernetes YAML manifest files, which will deploy those different containers. If we could do it with Docker Compose, then of course we can also do it with Kubernetes. So here we have multiple deployment files. So first deployment will deploy the Selenium hub image, okay, or the container. We'll expose the port 4444. Then another deployment for the Selenium node Chrome, okay, along with specifying the number of the replica that we want to create. And a third deployment for the Firefox browser. Here we want to say, for example, 2 Firefox browsers. Then, of course, we need to add the service that will be used to connect my UI tests. Okay, and the service here, again, it exposes the port 4444. Great. Here I have specified that the type should be load balancer in order for me to connect to my cluster from outside the cluster, okay, so that I can launch the tests from my local machine. So from here, if you want to deploy those different containers and connect to them, then we can deploy it into Kubernetes. Then we just need to change the remote URL to use the public available URL in Kubernetes. And before finishing this video, I want to leave you with the with this page right here. So if you go to the IP address of your grid hub, you open the /grid/console. From here you will see the different connected nodes, okay, the different worker nodes that are connected. Here you can see I have my Firefox browser connected, and you can see my Chrome connected, and you can also read the configuration for that browser. Okay, great. So make sure to check the different containers available for Docker Hub Selenium. Okay, and also if you want to get more information from the official documentation of Selenium, you can go to selenium.dev, and from here you get more information with more samples. That was all for this video. Please make sure to view my other videos on YouTube channel, where here I post videos about anything DevOps, containers, and Kubernetes. So thank you, and see you in next videos.